يساوي لحظة معاكو طول ما انتم جنبنا. ايه هيهمنا؟ كان نفسنا من زمان فعلا نفرح من قلبنا. لو تبعدنا السنين خليكوا قريبين، ده احنا ما صدقنا لقينا اخيرا ناس تشبه لنا فيهم مننا.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So before we start this webinar today, I'm on behalf of the steering committee, would like to give a few announcements for all participants today. So first of all participants in this Zoom platform must mute your microphone unless you are asked to unmute. For example, if you want to ask question, if you want to respond or address certain things to our panel, you may unmute your microphone. Secondly, if you wish to open your microphone to ask a question directly to the speakers, you are advised to press the raise hand button first, and then you can proceed with your question. And finally, all participants are required to switch on your camera throughout the ceremony. We will go live in a few minutes, so I hope that all participants could give their full attention to this webinar and participate in the discussion when you're asked for. We'll see you in a bit.
وبتجمعنا حاجات حلوة أكيد، يلا نمد الإيد من غير كلام. أجمل الأوقات بتيجي عالبال، يبقى الحمل جبال ننساه أوام أنت وأنا. ناس بترتاح لك ساعات، ياخدوا قلبك من سكات، يخطفوك من غير كلام، أصل فيك منهم حاجات وفي حياتك معدودين، اللي بكرة مكملين. ده انتوا وقت الاختلاف بنلاقيكم متفقين، حتى لوننا وشكلنا، يعني أنا شبهك تمام. وبتجمعنا حاجات حلوة أكيد، يلا نمد الإيد من غير كلام. أجمل الأوقات بتيجي عالبال، يبقى الحمل جبال ننساه أوام أنت وأنا. مهما قابلنا صعب نحس بفرحة غير وياكو، كل دقيقة حلوة بيكو بتجمعنا. يساوي لحظة معاكو طول ما انتم جنبنا. ايه هيهمنا؟ كان نفسنا من زمان فعلا نفرح من قلبنا. لو تبعدنا السنين خليكوا قريبين، ده احنا ما صدقنا لقينا اخيرا ناس تشبه لنا فيهم مننا. أيوة فيكم مننا نفس روحنا ودمنا، قلبنا بيرتاح هوام للي فعلا زينا. الكلام نفس الكلام حتى نفس الاهتمام، عشرة مش ممكن تهون يوم من الأيام. حتى لوننا وشكلنا يعني أنا شبهك تمام، وبتجمعنا حاجات حلوة أكيد. يلا نمد الإيد من غير كلام، أجمل الأوقات بتيجي عالبال، يبقى الحمل جبال ننساه أوام أنت وأنا. ناس بترتاح لك ساعات، ياخدوا قلبك من سكات، يخطفوك من غير كلام. أصل فيك منهم حاجات وفي حياتك معدودين، اللي بكرة مكملين. ده انتوا وقت الاختلاف بنلاقيكم متفقين. حتى لوننا وشكلنا يعني أنا شبهك تمام، وبتجمعنا حاجات حلوة أكيد. يلا نمد الإيد من غير كلام، أجمل.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning to all the participants in the Zoom platform, and also not to forget our friends who are watching this webinar through YouTube Live. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Muhammad Syami bin Abdul Rahman, your MC for today's webinar, Introduction to Islamic Philosophy of Science. So for your information, this webinar is organized by the Islamic Students Association UPM, PMI UPM, in collaboration with the Students Association of Faculty Biotechnology and Biomolecular Sciences, Faculty of Computer Science and Information Technology, Faculty of Modern Languages and Communication, and finally we have the Student Association Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences. Before we start with today's webinar, To bless this ceremony, I would like to invite Mr. Khairul Iman bin Zulkifli to lead the dua recitation.
MC. Al-Fatiha. Auzubillahi minasyaitonir rajim. Bismillah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma inna khalaqul azim, innaka sami'un alim, innaka ghafurur rahim, innaka rabbul arsyil azim. O Allah, we express our gratitude to you for allowing us to attend the webinar on Islamic philosophy of science on this auspicious morning. We seek your blessing for the lawless progress of this event from the beginning till the end. We seek your guardians to steer clear of events that would detriment the progress of this event. Allahumma ya Kareem ya Rahim. We ask you for the safety of our religion and the welfare of our body. O Allah, Lord of the implementing authority, make the days that we have gone through, starting with your mercy, continue with your blessing, and end with the victory of excellence. Ya Zal Jalali wal Ikram, O Allah, grant us with a valuable knowledge that will be beneficial to mankind in order to gain your Madatillah. Ya Latif Ya Rahman, we also seek protection from you for all the things that may tarnish the approach of our counsel, from all the things that neglect us from obeying you. Rabbana alayka tawakkalna wa ilayka anabna wa ilayka al-masir. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina azaban nar. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.
Amin, amin, ya Rabbal Alameen. Thank you so much, Mr. Khairul Iman, for the dua recitation just now. So without further ado, let's get acquainted with our panelists today. So it's a great pleasure for me to introduce our special panel. So for our first panel is Dr. Irwan Hanish bin Warsana. He is a senior lecturer at the Faculty of Biotechnology and Biomolecular Sciences, UPM. In fact, he is also a research fellow at the Islamic and Strategic Studies Institute, ISSI. Assalamualaikum and good morning, Dr. Irwan. How are you feeling today, Doctor?
Waalaikumsalam. Doing good. It's good to be here.
Alhamdulillah. So next, here we also have another special panel today. We have Emeritus Professor Datuk Dr. Osman Bakar. He is the holder of Al-Ghazali Chair of Epistemology, Civilizational Studies and Renewal, ISTEC-IIUM. And he is also the Emeritus Professor of Philosophy of Science, University of Malaya. In addition to that, he is one of the top international scholars in Islamic philosophy and also one of the 500 most influential Muslims in the world. Assalamualaikum, Prof. Osman. How are you today?
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. So seems like all participants can't wait to hear your great discussion from our panelists today. So to start the discussion, with all due respect, I would like to invite Dr. Irwan Hanish to give his presentation. The floor is yours, Doctor.
Okay, let me share the screen. Okay, I assume you can see this now.
Yes.
All right. Bismillah, Assalamualaikum warahmatullah. So thank you for being here. I titled my talk Science Beyond Exams because I want to invite you all to rethink your science learning beyond the exams and assignments. I mean, those are important, but for today, let's relax and reflect on what science learning means to you as science students and how you might use philosophy of science as part of that reflection. For the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to give you some starting points to think about two things. So firstly, what is philosophy of science? And more importantly, why does it matter to you as science students? So in its most general sense, philosophy of science is everything that underlies your thoughts and behaviors towards science. So the way I think about it is like this. I'm going to share with you my browser screen. Right, so when you open a web page like this, you're going to see text, you're going to see some colors and some dynamic behaviors. For example, if I click this, so that will happen, right? So think of the web page as the analogy of your science. So it includes how you think about science and how you behave around scientific ideas. So it's what on the surface. Now, if you are on your laptop, you can try this. You can click F12. So if you do that, what you're going to see is a window popped up, right? So these text and symbols are what underlie the web page that you see. So it's made up of HTML, the hypertext markup language, and cascading style sheets and other elements. So that's the analogy for philosophy of science. So it is what underlies how you think of science, how you talk about science, and how you behave around science. Now, I want to tell you a secret. As a science student, even today, I find it hard sometimes to grasp some technical concepts in philosophy of science. So if you feel the same way later, don't be discouraged, because that's not surprising. Just because I find it easy to navigate a web page, it doesn't mean I'll find it easy to understand the codes behind the web page, right? So let me take you back to the slides. So what you do is you start with the basics that you do understand, and then you build up from there. So this morning, I'll just teach you one basic concept. So it's called epistemology. Epistemology is the study of how we know things. So for example, how do scientists know that this vaccine works and that vaccine doesn't? And secondly, epistemology is also about the limits of our knowledge. For example, how far can we use our current scientific method to understand reality? So that's epistemology. The next question would be, why does it matter? If I can do science, why should I care about the philosophy of science? The answer is that if we Muslims don't care enough, we are at the mercy of others who do. So think about the web page analogy. If you don't care enough about the codes running behind the web page, people who do care and people who do understand the codes, they can deploy unwanted trackers or UI designs to influence your thinking and behavior. And similar things have happened to our philosophy of science. So philosophers in the past have influenced our thinking and behavior today. So this is an example. So it's a quote from 1842. So it's important to point that out because at that time, 200 years ago, Europe was much more religious, much more God-centered than it is today. So philosophers like Auguste Comte changed that. And this is representative of an epistemological position called positivism. But never mind that for now. I just want you to pay attention to the way of thinking that scholars like him introduced to students like you back then. So he said, from the study of the development of human intelligence, the discovery arises of a great fundamental law. So what is that law? The law says each branch of our knowledge passes successively through three different theoretical conditions. So what he's saying here is he's teaching us that we humans become more and more intelligent. As we become more intelligent, our knowledge moves from the most stupid form of knowledge to the smarter form of knowledge. So when we were stupid, we study things from the perspective of theology, right? Where God is at the center. And then when we become a bit smarter, we study things metaphysically. We study philosophy. And then when we become fully intelligent, we study things scientifically. So do you agree with that? Now, whether or not you agree with it, today, this epistemological attitude is widespread in the world. So how do you know? Because it has become part of our modern culture. So this attitude is normal today in the West. So comedy shows can make fun of people who believe in God, especially about how stupid religious people are compared to scientists. So think of the Big Bang Theory, right? Think about how Sheldon's mom was portrayed in that show. And it's not just in the West, you see. That epistemological view seeps through the colonized cultures like Muslim countries. So for example, I don't know how it is now, but when I was in school, top students are encouraged to go to natural sciences, physics, biology, chemistry, and students who do badly in their exams, and especially if they have disciplinary problems, parents and teachers would send them to religious schools. Why? Because we have absorbed this philosophy. Now, of course, teachers and parents are not adopting the philosophy consciously and saying out loud that science is for smart students and religious studies are not. But the philosophy is there. So it's embedded like codes behind a web page. So the more you study philosophy of science, the more you can debug your thoughts and behaviors and align them with Islam. So I'll give you this simple example. Kalam is a major branch of Islamic philosophy. So Kalam emphasizes the importance of pure reason when you study a natural phenomenon. So for example, Al-Ghazali wrote this book. You should get it. It's relatively short. Yeah. So it's not that big and it's quite thin, about 100 pages. So in this book, Al-Ghazali gives an example of a principle, which is the logical necessity that a bigger number is larger than a smaller number. So 10 is larger than 3. And then he teaches you that if I come to you as a microbiologist and I use a viral vector that can rearrange the molecular structures of a rod and turn it into a serpent, I change a stick into a snake scientifically. So I've got my 6 to 8 replicates and the statistical alpha is below 0.05. So the science is solid. And then I say to you, actually, science tells us that 3 is larger than 10. Smaller numbers are larger than bigger numbers. So how would you respond? Imam Al-Ghazali teaches you that you have to say no. You don't give up your intellect, your pure reason, just because a scientist shows you something that amazes you, right? So that's an epistemological principle. Now, you might think that, well, that's a fun example, but scientists don't do that, do they? They actually do. For example, a brilliant physicist, Lawrence Krauss, wrote a book that became hugely successful and sold millions of copies. And it is praised by the great biologist Richard Dawkins and other scientists. So their scientific credibility as a group is unmatched by people like you and me and Prof. Osman and anyone here. And they tell you that science shows that nothing can give rise to the universe. So you don't need God as a creator. Now, if you think about this just through the lens of science, you have to accept their claim because their physics is solid. It's accepted by the scientific community. But if you think about this through philosophy of science, you remember what Al-Ghazali taught you, that whatever the scientific observation is, your intellect understands certain logical necessities. So in this case, something cannot come from nothing. So philosophers of science took a look at this book, and then they realized that when the author uses the word nothing, he actually refers to the quantum vacuum, which is an empty space filled with the lowest possible energy. And then he calls that nothing. But that's not nothing, is it? It is something. It is space filled with quantum energy. So that distinction between nothing and something is not a scientific question. It's a philosophical question. And if you don't know and don't care about philosophy or science, even if you are a good science student, you will still be vulnerable to such confusion. And over time, you might even lose your religion. Now, even if you're not at any risk of losing your religion, your philosophy of science will still affect your scientific decisions. So in Marvel's The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the main character is called Sam Wilson. So Sam was struggling philosophically about whether he should take up the symbolic role of Captain America. One day, Sam was so shocked when he met another super soldier, another Captain America that nobody had ever heard of. So his name is Isaiah Bradley. So the reason we've never heard of Bradley is because of a cover-up. So the government scientists ran an experiment on Bradley and other soldiers. So the scientists lied to them to protect the experiment. So the scientists told them they are getting medicine while actually giving them experimental serums. And that experiment killed many of those soldiers. So you might think, that's just a plot to make the story interesting, right? So scientists in real life, they don't do that, do they? Unfortunately, they do. So that plot is inspired directly by the Tuskegee experiments. So for 40 years, since 1932, American scientists ran an experiment on poor people. So those scientists lied to them to protect the experiment. So the scientists gave them syphilis, a bacterial infection. And when they got sick, the scientists pretended to treat them. But the scientists did not give them penicillin, the real medicine. Why? Because the experiment needs to show what happens if you don't treat the disease. So that experiment killed 128 people. And the disease spread to their wives and even to their babies. So now remember, guys, that this happened in one of the richest, one of the most technologically advanced countries in the world. So, and it happened for 40 bloody years. So it's not an accident. So why did it happen? Not because the country didn't have money or technology, not because the scientists are not smart enough to find an alternative. It's because of their philosophy at the time, because of how they thought about science and how science was placed in their larger ethical worldview. So philosophy of science affects your methodological decisions, how you do science, and it affects your technological direction, how you apply science. So I'll conclude with this. Even if you don't end up being a scientist, right? Your philosophical understanding of science will still affect your daily life. So when you are on your phone watching a TikTok video by a science influencer, what you think about science will make you see certain data and ignore other data. So it neurologically affects your perception. And that will inevitably color your daily opinions and your daily decisions. And over time, that will determine your relationship with God and your destiny in life. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Irwan Hanish. So hope that with Dr. Irwan's presentation just now, it will help to enlighten our understanding regarding today's webinar topic. Ladies and gentlemen, now let's move on to the keynote session, where I would like to welcome Emeritus Prof. Datuk Dr. Osman Bakar.
Okay. Thank you, MC Brother Muhammad Shahmi. and everyone. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wa mursalin Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and a very good morning to everyone. First of all, thank you to Persatuan Mahasiswa Islam UPM and Dr. Irwan for inviting me to give a talk on a very, very important topic. So thank you and congratulations to PMI UPM for organizing. Really, I mean, this is the kind of thing that I would like to see more happening because this is the way to educate us to be more advanced in our knowledge culture and so on. So, Alhamdulillah. And thank you to thank you to yes, thank you to of course to PMI. I think this very nice e-poster, thank you, excellent one. And of course, you chose the photo that makes me younger than what I'm really. And so thank you for that. And thank you, Dr. Irwan, for choosing this topic for me, Introduction to Islamic Philosophy of Science. And actually, your introduction is very good. I mean, you look like you are now a philosopher of science. I've had nothing to object, nothing to criticize. You came out very well. All the points you presented is a true picture of philosophy of science in terms of what it is concerned with, in terms of the implication. Of course, given within the time space that the time slot that you have, you can only talk about some generalities. For example, when you refer to August Comte, all right, that I mean, there's much more to be said. So perhaps I can add a little more in my presentation, in my short presentation. And I think some of the important observations that you made are very, very important, worth repeating. In other words, philosophy of science is not something that you can just kind of ignore because what you study in science, your goals in science, your ambition in science, they're all connected to what kind of perspective you have, what kind of vision you have about science itself. That is very important, right? So I will now go to my presentation. All right. Here are my outlines of what I'm going to say in the next less than half an hour now. All right. I'll try to go quickly. The idea here, the thing is, philosophy of science, Islamic philosophy of science is a very, very vast subject. So I can only highlight a few things, but I would like to mention here that I try to be not because there are two types. You can go too philosophical, and then in the sense of the broad issues, or you can go into the technical kind of philosophy as you have in kind of logic, for example, in modern analytical philosophy, right? So you have this kind of two extremes. So I'll try to use words, for example, to express it in such a way that even non-scientists, non-students of science can follow. I'll try to that. So basically, I have 6 issues here. First, what is science? It's in the question mark. Some people think that no, this is a subtle issue. Why is in the question mark? Right. And then the second thing is, why is the difference between science and philosophy of science? And 1 or 2 things were pointed out by Dr. Irwan. I mean, he gave example to differentiate between science and philosophy of science. But I'll explain later. And then the number 3, is there such a thing as a universal philosophy of science? Because the moment we say Islamic philosophy of science, I mean, some people may say, well, philosophy of science is universal. And no such thing as Islamic philosophy of science, Christian philosophy of science, Buddhist philosophy of science, and so on. It's just universal. In the same way, people argue, no, there is only one science. There is no such thing as Islamic science. Right. Issue number 4, point number 4, what is Islamic philosophy of science? After answering question number 3, I now go to ask, what is Islamic philosophy of science? Basically, that is the topic that we are discussing today. And then number 5, if there is something Islamic, then we have to deal, we have to talk about issues of Islamicity. Yeah, in other words, what is Islamic? Then the issue is Islamicity. What is Islamic? What do you mean by Islamic philosophy of science? Why is it by mean not Islamic? So we have to deal that this is an issue. So then the final thing is, can we teach? This is important. That's why I consider our program today is important, because we have to talk about education. We have to talk about education in science, in philosophy of science. So I pose the question there: can we teach philosophy of science from the contemporary or modern Western and Islamic perspectives together? This is an important question. All right. I've given thought about it. Others have given thought about it. In other words, why do we teach only modern Western philosophy of science? Why not also we teach Islamic from the Islamic perspective? All right. Now, let me go to the first question. What is science? Actually, science is understood in the several ways today. There's not just only one understanding of science, more than one, right? I want to tell you this. I mean, I talk about my former campus, University of Malaya. I taught at the Faculty of Science. So if you go into the campus of the University of Malaya, next to the library, so across the road, you see Faculty of Science, right? Faculty of Science. That was one of the first faculties to be established in Malaysia. The first Faculty of Science in Malaysia, when the University of Malaya was established. So I was there. Now, but just across another road, you see Faculty of Social Science, or Faculty of Arts and Social Science. So you have 2 neighboring faculties, one with the name of Faculty of Science, another one with the Faculty of Arts and Social Science. Do you think that the word science there has the same meaning? No, it's not the same meaning. So 2 neighbors next to each other, using the same name science, but meaning differently. I've raised this a long time ago. We are living in terminological contradiction. Yeah, 2 faculties in the same university living with terminological contradiction. Yeah. So this I have here terminological issue. That's the first thing about this science. Now, as for the Faculty of Science, that they are using the word science there. This is a British legacy of British empiricism. A legacy of British empiricism. You know, in Britain and the rest of Europe, the 19th century was the century when people were debating about this issue, what science is, right? So basically, science, what I mean science, is study of the natural world, all right? Study of natural world. But in the case of the other faculty, science to mean it means an organized body of knowledge that is recognized as an academic discipline. So the word science can be applied not only to the study of nature, but also to the study of society, to study of this human culture. All right. So it's different. Yeah. But even in the case of science, I put in the bracket there modern Western versus traditional Islamic. All right. Because the science with the meaning of organized body of knowledge pertaining to some subject, right? The is still limited if you are taking in the modern Western sense, because I give you an example, theology. I ask, is theology a science or not? Well, even though many people in the West today accept the idea of science can be applied to academic disciplines other than the natural science, but still they will never accept. No way theology can be considered a science. But in the traditional Islamic civilization, knowledge culture, even that they accept the science of God. So, the science of God. That's why you have the word ain. In Arabic, the word ain, and in Malay and Malaysia ilmu, all right, ilmu, basically referring to any subject matter as long as it is based upon a certain organized body of knowledge around that. So that is the first issue. But the question now is the issue is not simply terminological. It's not just quarrel about term, but also epistemology. So Dr. Irwan already raised that about epistemology. But of course, the one he presented, that is only part of the branch of knowledge called epistemology. Epistemology is much wider, but he is correct. The core of epistemology is question of how do we know? How do we know? The question of methodological issue. So this is this important to realize. Yeah? In Europe, in the West, in the 19th century, that century when you have Charles Darwin, when you have Auguste Comte, yeah, many other people talking about that, they all live in the same century. They all live. Karl Marx is also important to question of epistemology at the extreme of that. So something, in other words, in the West, in the 19th century, basically people are asking, what is true science? What is true science? What is science that is acceptable and what is not? So that's why also in the same century, in the same 19th century, they were debating, is psychology a science or not? Is psychology a science or not? Well, some of them say no. In fact, many of them say psychology is a pseudo science, not real science. Pseudo, the word is pseudo. Pseudo science. Only partly science. The others not science. But to answer the question, what is true science? It brings up the issue of methodological issue, because that was the issue. Yeah? In the West, minds, the people with this intellectual mind, getting critical of of the knowledge claimed by religion. So that's why the context was really a religion versus science debate in the West. So since religion makes claim about knowledge, not from the empirical, from the empirical perspective, but based on what is in the Bible, what's in Revelation, what the Christian theologian said. So you have that debate, all right? So all right, they say no. I mean, we cannot verify. You know, we cannot verify what the church is saying. All right, we want verification. Of course, it is a medical issue because for them, there is only one way to verify. That is through experimentation, through sense perception, through empirical means. What cannot be proved through empirical means is not regarded as knowledge. The present situation is much more relaxed, but very, very tense. The situation was very, very tense in the 19th century. But the impact is not confined to the West. The impact is not confined to the West because of colonialism. The greater part of the world was colonized by the West. So colonial epistemology have an impact on the rest of the world, and we were also affected by that. All right. So what was, for example, the quote by Dr. Irwan, the quote of August Comte? You know, the way he presented that, and he said that, it's as if that is the experience of the whole world. Yeah, when he talk about religion fictitious, then the age of metaphysics, which is abstract, that the age of science, which is positive. It is not even true that it is applies to the whole of Europe. Yeah, to the whole. What more you want to apply that to the history, the whole history of humanity? That's the problem we had. The problem, people in the West beginning to claim, they begin to claim that what they believe is concerns the whole world, not just simply Europe. All right. So this issue question basically, what is true science? How do you know that is true or to verify? So therefore, the issue is not just how to know the issue is not only how to know, but how do you know that what you know is true? That's the thing. How do you know what you know is true? Think about it. Right. So that's why for many people in the West and then later in the rest of the world, the ideal science is science, not theology, not sociology, not philosophy. No, that's not the ideal science. Until later, to the point that they went, in a sense, to the end of the kind of the empiricism. Let's say, well, the real science, the ideal science is physics, not even biology, because biology you still have to do with life. You know, when you deal with a living thing, you cannot be as predictable. For example, as physics. Physics can forecast, can predict, can make prediction about the future based on knowledge of the current phenomena. So, in short, because it's a big issue, in other words, the word science itself raises the question of epistemological issue. This is only in the modern West, not before that. Before modern times, the West had the same kind of epistemology as Islam. In fact, the West was influenced by Islamic knowledge culture. Yeah. So the word science, for example, as we have now, is derived from the Latin word scientia. But the Latin word scientia has the same meaning as the Arabic ilm. So in other words, there's no problem. It's only after the West, when the West began to abandon the knowledge culture that is associated with philosophy and religion. No, the other one is not right. Well, if that is the case, we have a civilizational issue. Basically, just simply the word science, the discourse on the word science, the debate on the word science, and it happened that the view that gained dominant, was the first meaning study of the natural world. So not only the University of Malaya, but in the whole world, we have this problem. So then I say, the impact, there was an impact, and there is an impact of the dominance of the first meaning of science or modern civilization. In other words, the situation we are in now, some people have the a kind of critique, all right? The critique of branches of knowledge other than natural science. For a long time, the other sciences will look with suspicion, not real science. Okay, now I go to the next. So what is the difference between science and philosophy of science? Just say something more than what Dr. Irwan has mentioned, right? I would just want to emphasize, I cannot go into, because we're going to have discussion. Just want to emphasize a number of points about the difference. Now, every science has a philosophy, which we call philosophy of science. First of all, whether it is social science or natural science, has a philosophy. So even natural science, every branch of natural science, which is this chemistry, physics, biology, geology, and so on, actually, there is a philosophy. But many scientists just ignore that or do not admit that. Right? So this is a very interesting topic. Saudi Arabia banned philosophy. But that doesn't mean that there is no philosophy in Saudi Arabia. Yeah? The philosophy now disguised under a different name, under the name of theory or something like that. Yeah, but in essence, it is philosophy. Yeah. So that's very important to observe. Every science has a philosophy, which we call philosophy of science. Now, in general, science deals with knowledge of details, and philosophy of science with knowledge of principle. I say in general, yeah, because there can be overlaps. Because the two interact. So, but generally we can say that science deals with knowledge of details, all right? But we come to the principles. We should be able to distinguish between principles and detail. That is something we learn in philosophy or science. Now, then in reality, science cannot be separated from its philosophy, which serves as its foundational assumptions. So every science is a kind of architecture of ideas, like a building of ideas. Every science is like a building of ideas. How can you have a building without a foundation, without a base, without a foundation? All right. Every house, below that is grounded, right? It has a foundation. It's only the problem now, of course. Yeah. When we look the what call this, we should normally when we say house is there, we are referring to the actual building, but not to the foundation. But actually, when we say house, it includes the foundation. This is the problem. I think the problem is a psychological problem. Yeah. In other words, when we have a house, we enter our house. Normally, we doesn't come to our mind about the condition of the floor of the house, condition of the foundation of the house. Normally, just talk about something else. Because we never ask about the condition of that. All right, we assume that it's okay. The same thing with science. For most students of science, they don't question the foundation. Yeah, They don't question the foundation. They assume it's okay. All right. But my point is, every science has foundational assumptions, and it is the business of philosophy of science to check from time to time, whether the foundational assumptions are okay or not. Yeah. No, look, for hundreds of years, our foundation were based on Isaac Newton's physics. Yeah. In other words, the foundation, the assumption is that the universe works like a machine, functions like a machine. That's what it's called mechanistic philosophy. When we study physics in our school, we learn this, all right? But 300 years or 200, more than 200 years later, then this discovery of quantum physics, all right? The quantum physics. Now, quantum physics, all right, basically question the very foundation of Newtonian physics. That's why now we have the problem, right? All right. Now, the other point to observe about different philosophy of science deals with the epistemological structure of science. So this is not the business of science. Now, making clear a very, very important component of epistemology. Yeah? So what is this epistemological structure of science that philosophy of science should know about? 4 elements. Element number 1, defining the domain of study of that science. For example, you study biology. So what is the domain of study of biology? What are the boundaries? What is the boundary between biology and the other sciences? Yeah. So that is not the business of science. When scientists ask the question, they are already philosophers. They're already philosophers. Yeah. So it is in one's capacity as philosopher of science that people want to know what are the limits of our understanding. Are we encroaching into another domain, another science, or not? Right? Then let's say, for example, the difference between biology and psychology. Is there boundary between biology and psychology? Well, this is a question that we have to do. Now, the other one, of course, again here, assumptions. All right. So we want to study about energy, force. To study about the space, what space is. Yeah? You brought the space, for example, nothing, the universe is not from nothing. Yeah. Or we cannot have something. Can really have the universe out of nothing? But so when we study this thing, all right, then do we have to assume that certain things are true? Only based on those assumptions, you can proceed to the next step of study. But there are things which science itself cannot prove. So you have to make assumptions. Just simply, for example, to assume that nature runs on based on order. There is order in the world of nature. How do you know? How do we know that's true? But we assume that is true. Because if we assume that nature is orderly, there's no laws operating, then it's not, then we cannot proceed really. Yeah. First of all, in terms of the assumption is we have to know that it is possible to know something. It is possible to know. So if we in the beginning understand, no, it's not possible, then you don't move. you don't move. Yeah. So that is the foundational assumptions of each science. Different sciences, different assumption. And then, of course, methods of study. Issue of methodology, which is part of epistemology. And the 4th element is objectives of study. So 4 elements that constitute the structure of science, the epistemological structure. And this basically is the business of philosophy of science. Now, is there universal philosophy of science? Well, my answer is partly universal, partly particular. That is, you can't have 100% universal philosophy of science of the body. Yeah? And so partly universal, partly particular. And let me explain what I did. So the universal dimension is common to all civilization. So that's what we call universal dimension, that which is common to all civilization. Now, the particular dimension is unique to a particular civilization. So that's why we have, in the case of Islamic philosophy, I'm coming to that now. So it is partly universal, partly particular. Yeah. So the dimension of Islamic philosophy is that which is unique to particular to itself. Now, what explain why do you have partly universal and partly particular? The most important reason, the most important shaping factor, it is religion. Yeah, religion, because it is religion. So why do we have, let's say, Buddhist philosophy of science? Because it has something to do with Buddhism, right? The study of the mind, for example. So Buddhist scholars in the past like to study about the mind based on the teaching of the Buddha. Right? So Islam, yeah, Ibn Sina studies the psychology, even non-psychology, even biology, in also it is based because it is based on the Quran. In other words, the Quran and the prophetic hadith influence what I mean is that there are certain things about Islam when it applied to the philosophy of science that is unique to Islam in the case of the one that is particular, right? All right. Now, what is Islamic philosophy of science? So we already said that philosophy science is partly universal, partly particular. Now, but we emphasize that it is meaningful. Yeah? It is meaningful to talk about Islamic philosophy of science. It is not absurd. The word Islamic there is not absurd, it's not false, but it corresponds to reality. It corresponds to historical reality. It corresponds to also the Quran, the teachings of the Quran. So it is legitimate. It is legitimate for us to speak of Islamic philosophy of science. Now, philosophy. My first point here. Now, to the question, what is Islamic philosophy of science? It is correct to say, well, Islamic philosophy of science deals with issues in philosophy of science that are treated from the Islamic perspective. So any issue in philosophy of science, but we answer that, we deal with that from the Islamic perspective. Now, it is also possible to answer the question, what is Islamic philosophy of science, by saying it refers to philosophy of science that is contained in the Quran and prophetic hadith. That is another way of expressing or referring to the theme. In other words, we say, actually, in the Quran and the hadith, there are so many themes related to philosophy of science. And another way of saying this, of course, I mean, the Islamic philosophy of science is not simply what is based on the Quran and hadith, but also the philosophy of science that has been developed by Muslim scholars on the basis of the Quran. So it's not just simply there is something which is direct from the Quran, but it can. But the Muslim scholars later on refer to the Quran, refer to the Hadith, and they came up with their own philosophy of science. We are talking about many schools of philosophy of science in Islam, not just one school. So you have to know You have to know the history of Islamic thought, then only you can appreciate that. Yeah. So now I'm repeating now what I mentioned earlier just to emphasize. So what are the main issues of Islamicity? So in philosophy of science, if we are concerned with Islamic philosophy of science, then we have to deal with the term Islamicity. Now, I'm saying that there are so many issues. You can talk about the issue of ethics, yeah, the purposes of studying science, how to apply science, what to study and not to study. These choices. These are choices that are important from the perspective of Islam, because knowledge is so broad, so vast. So you have to have a sense of priority. Yeah? What should be the priority in philosophy of science? All these questions are relevant, yeah? But I think when all things are considered, we all can compact, make it compact. Basically, all the issues in the of Islamicity can be reduced to four things: the subject matter of science. Yeah, that's one issue. The subject matter of science. The subject matter of science is not agreed by everyone, by every civilization. No. Yeah. For example, let's say psychology. Yeah. So Western psychology, modern psychology, in other words, consider, okay, this is in other basically the subject matter of psychology is the cognitive, in other words, the cognitive aspect of ourself. Yeah, they don't recognize the soul, of course. Yeah, so therefore they have to talk in terms of the consciousness of the individual, the rationality of the individual, the intelligence of the individual. So what kind of brain we have, what is the connection between brain and our intelligence, all right? And of course the behavioral, the behavior of individuals. What motivates human behavior? What to do and not to do? What is the factor? What is the scientific factor or the material factor that determines that? But certainly Islamic psychology cannot accept that. Say, yes, that's part of it, but that's not all. In other words, Islamic psychologists say, oh, our subject matter is much broader than what you have. So this is part of the problem now. Part of the problem why we have conflicts, why we have debate, just simply around the question of what is the subject matter of psychology. One. Now the other one is foundational assumption of science. So the foundational assumptions can be regarding the cosmological assumption. Yeah, they're very level. Remember that we are talking about the house built on having a foundation, but the foundation consists of several levels. You can have the physical level of the foundation, then you can have the natural, something like biological assumption about life. We want to study living organisms. We have to make certain assumptions. Right? Of course, the belief of the people, the materialists, the assumptions of life based on the materialist perspective is different. They say that life is something that originated from matter itself. In other words, the life something that evolved out of matter. But that cannot be accepted. The assumption is contested by Islam, by Islamic philosophy also, because life comes from the transcendent world, comes from the divine. So that kind of thing. Yeah, the assumption regarding the ontology, regarding the ontology, the ontological reality of the world. We study nature, we have to assume many things about nature. Now, that was methodology. How do we know? How do we verify truth claim? This is very major issue of Islamicity on methodology. I've written a lot on this because I consider this to be very important. Because for us, it's very crucial. Muslims believe in revelation. Wahyu. So for Muslims, methodology has also includes the question of revelation as a source of knowledge. In Islam, we accept revelation as the first important source of knowledge. Then we also had the position of the prophetic knowledge from the prophet. The prophet is regarded in Islam as the best interpreter of the Quran. And therefore, his interpretation of the Quran is important to our methodology of science. But we also accept ilham, this inspiration. And ilham, of course, is of various degrees, not just one level. There are many levels, degrees of ilham. The book referred to by Dr. Irwan about Ghazali's, for example, well, in that book explains in that book, right? In other words, how he experienced a personal crisis when he was about 20 years old. It crisis, basically because he was trained as a lawyer. So it's very interesting. He was trained as a lawyer. Lawyer trained, rationally, just based on logic. You have to be logical, all right. But at the age 20, the question of this, he looks at the claims of knowledge, of truth, from the Sufis, from the philosophers, yeah. So and the question, basically, the issue is, can we accept intuition? Can we accept intuition, ilham, as a source of knowledge? So the question bothered Al-Ghazali to the point that he experienced the crisis. But when the crisis was over, he accepted, you see, this kind of light, enlightenment, the light, the inspiration that God put into the breast of people who experience that. Yeah. So this is something which empiricists say, oh, no way, it's all rubbish, it's all fictitious. Yeah. But we have to do that. Then number 4, what are the purposes of science? What are the purposes of science? In other words, is it only to, so basically, what is the utility of science? Is it only for material things? But what about also for intellectual things? In other words, the purpose of science is not just simply physical material, but also intellectual. Because we must reach certainty in our knowledge, to be certain in our knowledge, not to be doubt. Yeah. So one of the purpose of science is also to remove doubt from our thinking. That is very useful. Science actually can help to remove certain doubts that we have, but also spiritual and moral. In other words, science also serves a spiritual purpose. The details, of course, I mean, we have to learn. We have to learn Islamic philosophy of science. Then we know the details. So my final slides. Can we teach philosophy of science from modern Western Islamic perspectives together? Well, yes, we can, and I think we should. That is my one. Yes, we can, and I think we should. Now, why? Well, for our time now, yeah, the kind of progress that we attain in science, in many other things, all right? So a comparative approach is perhaps the best. Comparative approach. A more enlightened philosophy of science will emerge from this agenda. No? If we take seriously this question that I'm asking, all right, then I think with the interaction between the Islamic and the modern, and what more from the other religious cultures, also from the other religions, not just from Islam, from Buddhist science, from Hindu science. No, this is good for the future of philosophy of science. And since you are all science students, you all, basically, you want to become scientists, all right? I'm telling you, science will benefit from this new learning enterprise, inshallah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
All right. Thank you, Emeritus Prof. Dr. Osman Baka, for enlightening and educating us on Islamic philosophy of science. Ladies and gentlemen, we are done with the opening sessions from both speakers. Now, it's time for us to hear a discussion between Dr. Irwan and Prof. Osman regarding our topic today. But before that, if you have any questions to be asked during the discussion, please send it via the chat box for those in this Zoom platform. And for our YouTube viewers, you can type it in the comment section and our committee will help to read out your questions once the discussion is finished. So without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Irwan again to conduct the discussion. The floor is yours, Doctor.
All right, thank you, Shami. So I'll just jump right into it. So I think my first question is more like a biographical question, Prof. Osman. So you did your undergraduate study in mathematics. I think you even did your master in mathematics. Is it right?
Yes.
Yeah. So my question is
my first degree was in the, mathematics, and I was in the last batch of students doing mathematics at the University of London, because that program, right from year one until the final year, I learned nothing except mathematics. So it's called special degree in mathematics, but mathematics, of course, both pure and applied. So in applied mathematics, I learned a lot also of theoretical physics.
right. So my question is how did you move from mathematics to Islamic philosophy? So do you remember what happened?
Well, basically when I did my master's, I still did my master's in mathematics, pure mathematics in algebra. And then I registered after my master's. I registered for a year. I was a PhD candidate again in mathematics. But somehow during that period, when I was doing the PhD, I read books on logic, on the philosophy, especially philosophy of Bertrand Russell, who we know his position regarding God, very kind of agnostic. And then at the same time, I discovered books on the Islamic science, on Islamic philosophy, including works by Al-Ghazali. Then a clash emerged, a clash of perspectives emerged in my mind, basically, until the part of me that won that contest was the one that said, no, I think you better go and study deeper into philosophy of science, philosophy in general. So that's happened. I wanted to do PhD in that, but the University Kebangsaan, my employer at that time, said no. It's not our policy to allow change of that. You come back. So I became pensyarah lecturer at the UKN, the Department of Mathematics, for several years before I.
Oh, you taught mathematics first.
Sorry. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
right. I didn't know that.
No, I did. But besides teaching mathematics, several years until 1977. I taught at UKM from 1973 until 77. So more than 3 years I was at University Kebangsaan and I taught mathematics. Right? But because I love history of science and philosophy of science, so I approached the Al-Irham Professor Ghazali, who was the Deputy Vice Chancellor in charge of academic and at that time. So I please allow me to teach elective courses on philosophy of science and history of science. So I was allowed. So I was, that was the first time in the history in Malaysia that philosophy of science was taught as a course for the fourth year, for the fourth and final year students at UKM. So mainly for science students, but also taught this compulsory course on the kursus kenegaraan. Kursus kenegaraan. So the Tamadun Islam was compulsory to all students other than the faculty of Islamic studies, right? So I taught Islamic science, history of Islamic science to the students also. So that was the situation.
Is it difficult to move from studying mathematics to studying philosophy?
Well, actually, no. And there's a reason for that. In Islamic knowledge culture, Islamic civilization, there's always been a very close relationship between mathematics and philosophy. So it has been said in Islam that mathematics is the bridge between natural science and metaphysics. So that was the role of mathematics. They call it Jacob's ladder. The ladder to go from the physical world to the spiritual world is through mathematics. That's why in Islamic history, most of the scientists and men were very well versed in mathematics. So mathematics is very, very important to philosophy. So I think, it happened that it's my best subject also when I was in school. So that helped.
Oh, okay. So one of the things that I realized when I start looking into philosophy of science is how much it emphasizes the study of history of science. That is not something that is very much emphasized when you just study science topics. Like when I study microbiology or immunology, we don't really go deeply into the history of science. So, but when we start reading about Islamic philosophy or Islamic philosophy of science, there is an emphasis on understanding our history of thoughts. So why do you think history is important in Islamic philosophy of science?
Certainly, knowledge of history of ideas, scientific ideas, was considered very important by Muslim scientists of the past. So, in other words, the history of the discipline, knowing who were the great minds in the past or who contributed to that field, they should know, right? The concepts, all right, the scientific concept. It's basically what we do now, say for research students, PhD students, for example. PhD students want to write research proposal. So we have literature review, a section called literature review. Well, it's only that in the case of our scientists like Farabi, like Ibn Sina, like Al-Biruni, they took it as their as an important task. Yeah? They should know their predecessors. They do not want to go beyond until they consider that they are knowledgeable about their predecessors. Well, some people say, okay, their time, they can afford to do that because there were only few authorities in the past, but now today the situation is different. No, but actually that is not. It's not. I don't think that is acceptable. Yes, there are more people, more scientists that we need to know, but then we also given better facilities, better ways. To know that. Yeah, but you can imagine what kind of the hardship, what kind of obstacle the earlier scientists faced. All right, but Ibn Sina could still, provide a summary of what Aristotle did, what the people of Aristotle did. What is important is the idea, the principle. In other words, they consider that if they want to excel in one particular branch of knowledge, they must know the work before, before them. That was the principle they observed. So that's why I have suggested in my lectures even in Malaysia, I've raised this several times. I said it will be very good, no? Rather than say you want to teach about Islamization, the whole university. So then you listen, because it's compulsory, then students have to listen to few lecturers talking about that. I said it will be more effective if every faculty of science, every faculty make it science compulsory at the faculty level. In other words, faculty of biotechnology, for example. So there should be a course on philosophy of biotechnology that should be studied by all students of the faculty during their study. So less students, no, less students involved can concentrate on really on the real issues of philosophy of biotechnology. That will be my view. My view is that that'll be more effective. Yeah. So every faculty can do that. That will be very good. That will raise the quality of our students. I believe so. Yeah, because we become more enlightened, and don't think that is a waste of time. No, it's not a waste of time. It will enlighten more about our subject matter. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good idea. I guess number one is try to convince the academicians that this is not a waste of time. And secondly, the challenge will be, we don't really have lecturers at universities who can actually teach. I guess not many lecturers who can teach the history and philosophy of specific sciences. So what do we do then?
This egg and chicken thing, you know. Why you say there are not many? But yeah, there's a reason for that. Why? Because we don't care. We never bother to train people. So universities send lecturers, young lecturers, to do PhDs. Some of them, I'm talking about now the teaching staff, the tutors. So if we think that that kind of knowledge is important, then we will take measures. We'll take measures to produce 2 or 3. It's not this kind of thing is not necessary to have many. We don't need many. 2 or 3 people is enough who are knowledgeable in the area.
We need to make another event, Prof. Osman, to talk to lecturers, because now we're talking to students, right? We need to make another one. So you mentioned in your talk how the Saudi government banned philosophy. So that's not the only example that I've come across how Muslim societies, they kind of hostile to philosophy. So why do you think that's the case?
Based on misunderstanding. Sometimes the misunderstanding has been perpetuated. All right. Recently, since I've been talking quite a bit now about Al-Ghazali, so after some people from Indonesia, from other listen to my lecture about Al-Ghazali, now they say, oh, this is not the Ghazali that I've been told by some people. You know, we have been told that Al-Ghazali is anti-philosophy, for example, against philosophy. But your talk, I say, no, you portray him in a positive light. Yeah. That's why we should.
He's a logician.
Read
Al-Ghazali is a logician.
Direct to the source. Don't listen to others. Why don't you read yourself what Al-Ghazali said? Ini susah lah kan, we listen to second source.
Yeah.
Or maybe even third source. Go to the original source. Why is emphasized in Islam is go to the source, the original source.
Speaking of looking at, so that's one kind of weakness that we have usually among academicians and students. So what are the other mistakes that you see most commonly? What are the mistakes that you see most commonly in young scientists when they think about science?
Well, yes, I think what is true is that our the portrait of science that have been given to us. We have been inheriting even my time also. This thing has been inherited since for a long time. Basically, the science, the image of science, the picture of science that we inherited, that does not correspond to the true reality, even about science itself. And that's why history of science is important. We want to know what the true picture. Yeah. So then of course the question of science being neutral. This image, science has nothing to do with values. That the saying goes like that. But this is not true from the perspective of philosophy, not even true from the perspective of history. Right? In other words, values have played a very important part in shaping the development of modern science. In other words, out of so many values available in the West, so the people who want to create modern science just dismiss those values, which are normally associated with spiritual values, with religious values. Okay, they just ignore that and took a very, very hard stance against religious, especially the priests. So that's about value, basically. The value about progress, for example. Now, what was going on in the 19th West that influenced so much? Because the West has a new God. There was a new God in 19th century Europe. The new God is called progress. The new deity, the new God of the West in the 19th century was progress. Everybody was worshipping progress. That's why that concept of progress has become into an ideology. It's no longer social concept. All right, will become an ideology. Then we are all, let's say the West, and with the West means then everybody else has to follow. Basically, humanity is going in the direction of progress, no reversing, no turning back. Progress. And it happened that the most progressive in the world at that time is the West. And they have the right to make others also progress like that. So that was the situation. All right. So now, therefore, a different image, a false image of science, was planted into the minds of people, and we inherited that. Yeah. So they believe that if we want to progress in science, then we have to marginalize religion. We have even to set aside. Religion is not helpful to science. Many of the Muslims, including young people, still believe in that. Yeah. So it will take great effort on our part to even to address that. How to restore the true image of what science really is. I think that is the challenge. What is science? What it's meant for? What are the factors that can make us progress in science? If it's not through religion, well, you give in fact you give counter example. We give counter example in which religion has played a positive role. So maybe the so-called negative role, that is not true for us, it's true for them. Because the West and Islam did not go through the same history. there's no experience the same kind of the kind of this conflict between religion and science. Conflict between religion and science was not universal. That was an experience of the West, but the experience of Islam was different. So for Muslim students today, let us find out what our forefathers, our ancestors, the Muslim ancestors, experienced, which means knowing history of Islamic science, Islamic civilization.
Yeah, because that's something that I realized as well. We tend to learn, we tend to generalize the history of one civilization to another civilization, and that gets us in trouble. And when you talk about the history, it's something that I remember you taught me. This is way back. This is in your Friday night lectures at ISTAC before COVID, right? So you mentioned that history doesn't really go like a linear progression like this. History is more like helical. So it means that sometimes it goes down, sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down, sometimes it goes up. So there's such an important concept that you explained that I still remember until today, right? When it comes to that issue about value and science, or value-latedness in science, you mentioned how it's not true that science is value neutral it's not true philosophically, it's not true in history. So if I want to share something, that it's not even true biologically, because there's a paper in Nature that studied the effects of visual working memory on our perception, right? So the idea that most science students have about our observation of science is that we observe something objectively, and then we interpret what we observe. That's the picture that we have about scientific observation, but that's not true. What this study showed is that our memory affects our perception. Specifically our visual working memory affects our perception. So the experiment goes something like this. If I give you a shade of color, right? A shade of color like this color, and in the spectrum of color, you have the a more pinkish shade of color, and you have green shade of color, right? So if I give you this color for you to remember, and then I showed you two pictures, and one picture have this shade of color, and the other pictures have this shade of color. So if I show you that picture, then you can make a distinction between the two pictures. They have different shades of color. But if I give you this shade of color for one picture and then another one here, so your brain just cannot see it. Your brain cannot see the distinction between the two different observations. So it shows you, even at a very, very basic level of observation, what you have in your mind when you observe something can really affect how you see something. So that's a very, very important point.
You said is
So my next question is about the importance of language. So when I think Izzuddin or Azmin asked me whether we should do this event in Malay or in English, I immediately say that we should do it in English. So number one, because we want to make it accessible to international students. And number two, quite selfishly, I want to do it in English because it's much easier for me to prepare for the talk and for the conversation. Because if we do this in Malay, it will take me much longer to prepare my talk or to prepare my presentation or in my discussion in Malay, maybe like 5 times longer. So that becomes an issue, like a weakness of mine when I join these philosophy groups on WhatsApps, and when the group is using lots of Malay language and lots of Arabic language in the discussion. And then at some point I realized that I need to study philosophy from try to express it in different languages. So it's not like with natural sciences, usually you don't come into much trouble when it comes to language. So if you study a concept or an experiment in Malay and you study it in English, you will do just fine. But because of philosophy, it contains a lot of technical concepts, and some of those concepts cannot translate just readily from one language to another, right? So this is something that I start to discover. So in your opinions, how important it is that, so how much language affect the way we learn philosophy?
Well, if you look, at the syllabus for the study of science and philosophy of science given by Al-Farabi, who created that, who wrote that syllabus, basically, how to train scientists and philosophers. He started with English, with language. In other words, language is very important to both science and philosophy. And of course, it refers to the mother tongue. In other words, it is important to have a good command of language. But of course, which language, that depends on the kind of education that we went through, that we go through. Yeah. So in the case of English, all right, you are more comfortable with English because you were trained in English, you have written English, you taught in English, you teach in English. Then it is reasonable, it is acceptable that when it comes to philosophy, you feel that you are more at ease with English. But that only pertains to you personally. But if you look from the viewpoint of society, from the nation, which believes that Malay, Bahasa Malaysia, that is the national language, I think it is logical that they would like that the language of science, the language of English, the language of philosophy, be in Malay. Yeah, up at a certain level, of course. At a certain level, of course, you can be comfortable in more than one language. You can become it's not question which, either or, no. Yeah, you but you have to learn the language. Let's say, for example, Ibn Sina. Ibn Sina wrote both in Arabic and in Persian. Most of the work in Arabic, but because Persian was his native tongue, he also write in the Persian. That applies also to Al-Ghazali. Al-Ghazali also like that. Yeah. In fact, after the 10th century, then other Muslim languages play a role in philosophy, not just Arabic. So in the case of the Malay, I mean, the Malay as a language of philosophy, that was already evident in the Malay world. So, in other words, one cannot use the argument, well, when it comes to certain branches, when it comes to philosophy, Malay is not a good language. That's not true. All right. Question of individuals, some individuals favoring one or the other because of their personal experience, that is a different issue altogether. Doesn't matter. So the issue here is how important is language to the development of philosophy. My answer is very, very important. You have to really be good in one language in which you can express your knowledge in philosophy. Since we are talking about Islamic, so we have no choice but to learn Arabic. Not Arabic, necessarily Arabic as a spoken language, the modern Arabic, you want to be able to speak to other Arabic speaking people. No, it's that. Question is, how can we understand the concepts in the Quran, in the Prophet Hadith, about philosophy, about theology, about science. How can we do that unless we know Arabic? Certainly know, at least we know concepts, the terminology used in the Quran. That's important. In other words, for Muslim philosophers, they should know something about Arabic.
Okay, thank you. I just want to clarify that the reason I'm more comfortable using English as in academic conversation is not because I think English is better than Malay in terms of academic usage. It's not just English is better than Malay. This is something that I keep telling my students. My first year student in microbiology class, the first class, right? The first class I have with them. I tell them that it's important for you to understand that you are not restricted to knowledge by just one language. So for example, I'm one of the lecturers who accept assignments to be sent to me in Malay language, because I think it's important for lots of science students today to understand that sometimes you might be able to progress much faster in your scientific understanding if you study in your native language, because you grow up that way. Right. So the reason I'm comfortable with English is simply because I come from an educational background which uses English all the time. And also at home, I speak English because my wife doesn't speak Malay. So that thing is just a biographical fact. It's not because I think one language is better than another. Right. I think we can start taking some questions from the audience. So there's one here on YouTube by him Ibro. So he says, I have a question concerning the comparative approach. Can we adopt the multiplexity framework as developed by Dr. Recep Senturk in the implementation of the comparative approach? So I guess my question is, what is the multiplexity framework? And do you think it's a good strategy to implement the comparative approach?
Did I hear correctly? Multi-perspective?
Multiplexity framework as developed by Dr. Recep Senturk.
Can you, I don't, plexity?
Multiplexity. Have you heard of it before? This is by Dr. Recep Senturk. I don't know. I think I've heard of it, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Forgive me. I don't understand the term. But if you can explain the meaning, and then I can comment.
Yeah, because, maybe the questioner, brother Him Ibro, or sister Him Ibro, I'm not sure who it is. So can you, if you want to clarify to us, what does it mean by multiplexity framework?
Multiplex. How do you spell it?
Yeah, it's like M-U-L-T-I, multi, and it's multiplex, M-U-L-T-I-P-L-E-X, multiplexity.
So, I'm sorry, I'm not used to that term, to that term multiplex. What it means? It's not a common term. It's not used by everyone. So it can be a special technical term.
Yeah, maybe it's a new idea that's developed by this. Sounds like a Turkish academician. So if the person who asked this question, if you want to come back later and ask the question, it will be helpful. And let's take another one. Let's see on Zoom. Right. Oh, I see as well.
Multiplex.
Yeah, multiplex. So let's take a question from Mokri. So what are the other things that keep motivated you, or what keeps motivating you to explore more in philosophy studies beside your passion in this subject? What can you suggest to encourage students today, these days, to have an interest in philosophy studies?
Well, my belief that philosophy deals with the kind of knowledge that is very important, first of all, of course, personal. In other words, philosophy has helped me to understand many issues in a much better way. Philosophy has been able me to understand the Quran better, and philosophy has helped me to, in other words, to what I call to attain certitude, to attain certitude in knowledge. It is a kind of hikmah. Philosophy is basically hikmah, and hikmah, of course, enemies of various level. So in my life, philosophy has been helpful to me in trying to come to have a better knowledge of theology, to have a knowledge of the, in fact, of the other disciplines, the other sciences, to be interested with many branches of knowledge, not just one knowledge. They believe that philosophy is the mother of all sciences. So if I know philosophy, then I should know a little bit of the particular sciences, and of course, mathematics also help in that. Mathematics help me in philosophy. Yeah. So basically, to your question, it is intellectual ability, intellectual understanding. That's what philosophy has helped me broaden my intellectual perspective. It certainly broadened that. Enables me to be concerned also with knowledge from other religions, from other civilizations. Yeah. So in other words, talk about the universality. Philosophy is the instrument in order to attain that universality. And since Islam stands for universality, so philosophy has been helpful. So contrary to what some people say that philosophy is against Islam, I'm saying no. In my case, philosophy has enabled me to be more religious, be more spiritual. So on the different contrary.
Yeah. I think the way you get into philosophy is can be very personalized, can be very different for other people. Because in my case, I started to think about this is when I remember when I was doing my PhD, we were in a journal club where you discuss scientific papers among researchers. And then I remember at one point, one of the German professors, so he pointed out that, this paper doesn't have the p-value, the statistical value is not significant, which is p equals 0.05, right? So he said that, so this finding is not statistically significant, therefore it's not significant. And I found that bothering me for some reason, right? So I didn't know why that was. And it bothers me. And then I start reading about statistics, and I realized that he wasn't correct. And so that's kind of a glimpse of when I start thinking more about what I study in terms of scientific findings, right? And another kind of episode that I clearly remember is when I watched this talk by Professor Said Hussein Nasser. He was talking on RIS, the Reviving Islamic Spirit Conference. And then I never heard of him. I never heard of him before. And then I watched that talk where he talked about how in the past we have this Mongol invasion where it kind of devastates the Muslim lands. And what we have today is the kind of invasion of ideas, the secular ideas, anti-Islamic ideas, and that is more damaging compared to what the Mongols did to our Muslim lands.
Yes.
So right, yeah. So that kind of really grabbed my attention and makes me more interested to read more about the philosophy of science and about Islamic science.
Let me add 2 points more. I think it's very relevant to our students, to our young academics. Now, another benefit from philosophy, as I experience it, is to be critical, to truth claim. In other words, not easily to be swayed by opinions, for example. Yeah, because there's certain power in philosophy, yeah, that have that critical spirit. So the tendency is say, okay, I mean, you made that. Let me see. Let me examine it. Let me analyze it. Yeah. So that that spirit of being critical, that was contributed by my knowledge of philosophy. How to be critical of views, of opinions, of theories, concepts presented. That is important. Now, the other one, of course, is question of the ability to look at the whole. Most of our young people, the generation of people, have been trained to know they will call aspects, to have knowledge of certain aspects, to have detailed knowledge of things. In other words, yes, have good analytical ability. So our students have been trained to be good, to think analytically. But analysis is not everything. Right? Analysis will enable us to have detailed knowledge of things. Right? Detailed knowledge. We analyze. It's going, that movement going from one thing going to something that is broken up. You study the spirit of analysis is we study one thing, that we go into its components. We divide further the components. So we go on, breaking up things into their little pieces and then trying to understand each piece. All right. But where most of us are poor in is synthesis. All right. Now, synthesis means the ability to look at the whole. So, let's say the human body is not just knowing about the different parts of our body in an excellent way, our eyes, our nose, our throat, our stomach, and so on. What about the knowledge of the whole man, the whole person? That requires a different kind of knowledge, which is synthetical in nature, not analytical here now. It's synthesis. So our modern education ignores or marginalizes synthesis. We spend too much on analysis. Of course, analysis is important, but it's not balanced by synthesis. Now, philosophy has the ability to balance between the needs for analysis and synthesis. And this is what is missing in science education. So if you cut a rabbit, into little pieces, how to bring the whole rabbit back? You bring a rabbit into the laboratory, science lab, study lab, then cut the rabbit into pieces to study all different parts of the rabbit. Hey, what about the original whole rabbit? How can we get that again? We don't know. We don't have the ability.
Yeah. That reminds me also that it relates to the question about how do you get people to be interested in philosophy. I think part of it is your personality as well. So for example, if you do personality tests like the hexagon model, so there's a personality trait called openness. So openness is when your mind are easily more likely to associate things from different fields. Right? So not everyone is like that. So it's like a spectrum. Some people are very associative. You see that in artists usually. So they just grab this idea, and put them together. But so for some people, they're very specific. They look at one thing and they just go deep into that particular discipline. So I think if you have a higher openness, you're more likely to be interested in philosophy because you kind of almost need to understand so many things at once. What do you think?
Yes, I think that is quite logical. if you go to Mount Kinabalu, Gunung Kinabalu, you climb, all right? So you go up the slopes and you go up to the top. So different people happen to be on different parts of it. Then you have one person right on the top of Mount Kinabalu. Of course, whose view is the best? The one is logical. So the person who is on the top of the mountain will see more than one who is at the lower part of the mountain.
But it's not going to see it in detail, right? It's not going to see he's not going to see the details like the tree. He's going to see the forest.
The horizon. The horizon.
Yes.
Yeah. Not the detail. For detail, you have to you can't see from the top of the mountain.
Yeah. So the questioner from YouTube who asked about multiplexity. So he says multiplexity is maratib al-wujud. So does it help you to answer that question?
What wujud? What wujud?
Maratib al-wujud.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. What do you mean?
Yeah. What's that?
Yes. The idea that is important to that means I use different word, hierarchy. But of course, if you go to Arabic, then maratibul wujud. Maratibul wujud. In other words, different. There's an hierarchy, ontological hierarchy of reality. Let's say, for example, you have physical reality. That's one level. But reality is not just physical. It's not only what is perceived by our physical senses, but also the spiritual level in the region inhabited by the angels, for example, the angelic domain. So the angelic domain is another level, but it's higher than the physical. It is more real in a sense. Yeah, we can define what is being real, but it is more real than the physical. You have above the angel, of course, is God Himself, which is the most real, the absolute reality. But you can also below the angel. Now, below the angels, basically, which is situated in between the spiritual, the angelic domain, and the physical domain, what's called the psychic domain, right? The imaginal level, the world of the imagination. Now, in Islamic philosophy and Islamic thought in general, because it's based on the Quran, no? So maratibul wujud, the hierarchy of existence, that is accepted as a very important principle in the study of science. This idea has been demolished, has been marginalized, has been neglected by modern science. Islamic science do that because precisely, even if you student biology, you study biology. So what is the subject matter of biology, right? So the subject matter of biology, in the Islamic perspective, of course, because Islamic perspective is soul biology. The soul is a very important concept in Islamic biology. But although we cannot see the soul leaves manifestations in the physical thing. So we study effects. Yeah. Now, the principle of that we can know something by studying its effects, that is accepted not only in Islam, but even in modern modern science. Let's say in the in quantum physics, for example, we deduce the existence of certain things based on our knowledge of the effects. What is visible? All right. In cosmology, in modern cosmology, they deduce certain. They make the same thing. So, but the question is, does biology study only physical things that can be observed? Well, from the viewpoint in the modern context, since our senses have limits, now we are using microscopes, for example, to know the mystery of the cells. What is even the smaller than the cell? All right. Basically, here we have soul biology in the case of Islam, and then cell biology in the case of modern biology. But that is not the end of thing. No matter how deep you pierce into into the at the cellular level, or you create all the even more powerful microscope. The point is there's a limit. There's a limit to that. What's beyond that? So right now, as I see it, the microbiologists are now in that border region. The border region between what can be perceived by the eye, whether aided by microscope, and what is cannot be seen, which called in Islamic thought the psychic reality, and the psychic in the sense what we call the approaching a kind of the invisible world. So so now we are studying basically what the microbiology is studying, effects of certain things which cannot yet be perceived by the sensor, but effects you can see. Yeah. So the effects point to something more real, right? So just now the people we are trying to understand the viral kingdom, the kingdom of the viruses. Well, from this viewpoint of Islamic biology, all right, the cause of the viruses that they are in its invisible world. But now that invisible world, from time to time, will manifest itself in the physical world. So we are at the moment in that stage. In fact, it was from Islamic biology. You say, well, we are going deeper and deeper into the unseen,
Yeah. So yeah, that borders between life and non-life is not very clear when you get very at this microscopic level. So that's
which
why
means now, which means now that the concept of hierarchy, the hierarchy of reality. So that level of reality is not the same as at the physical level that is studied by chemistry. Yeah. So in other words, chemistry and the inner microbiology, the cellular biology, are not dealing with the same phenomena. Two different set of phenomena.
It's going to take a lot of work to justify and clarify that,
Yes.
Yeah. Well, there's another question. Is the concept of science that you understand similar to what Said Hussein Nasser always conveys?
Well, I belong to the same school on this. In other words, when it comes to philosophy of science, I share a common position with Said Hussein Nasser. He was my teacher. So in other words, but this is not a matter of individual choice. In other words, what we believe in. They are also shared, or rather, what the Muslim philosophers of science in the past have been saying.
Yeah.
We are not producing anything new. We are merely just presenting that in a new language, contemporary language, but the same truth. We are dealing with the same truth. And those truths are based ultimately on the Quran.
And also, I think most philosophers are very comfortable if their students don't agree with them, because otherwise it will be too boring.
No problem. Yes, I mean the question, but then we don't do it just to pretend. And I will not just for the sake of it. No, and after all, Aristotle quarreled with Plato.
Yeah.
And the questions when he said, "Well, I love the truth more than Plato." So he was a student of Plato. Now the student said to Plato, "Sorry, Plato, my teacher, I love the truth more than I love you." Yes, right. that welcome that.
Okay. All right. I think we're going to have to end soon. So I'll just ask you one last question, I guess. So what is your hope for science students? And your final words, any of the final message that you want to give us?
Hello? Sir?
Sorry, so this will be the final question. So what is your hope for science students, and what is the last message that you want to share with us before we go?
Well, first of all, this is a good thing. So I hope there'll be more things coming from the students, in particular from PMI. In other words, let this be a new chapter. Let's say, in other words, there are a lot of things, and you're the younger generation are in a better position than my generation, because you have more information, you have more facts. All right, but my response is that it's not enough just to have more information, more facts. Certainly we need to look this now from a broader perspective. Basically, it's a choice of interpretation. Yeah, remember, interpretation. We can be interpreting the same facts by having the same conclusion. So to me, this is very important, the art of interpretation, to understand what are the factors that shape interpretations. Interpretation is not neutral free. It's not. So in other words, to understand what are the scientific factors, what are the material factors, the environmental factors, and also the cultural factors, and finally even the religious factors that influence interpretation. So I'm affirming here, I'm saying here that many scientists are interpreting that not, in other words, that they're also influenced by values. So the very people who object to the impact of values on interpretation, they themselves are influenced by certain values in their interpretation. And therefore, it's up to us now to look for the real interpretation that is not influenced by political factors, not influenced by material factors, or pharmaceutical companies' interest, and so on. What is the most objective interpretation? That is what we are going for. So thank you very much.
Right, thank you. Thank you everyone for coming to this event. So please fill in the feedback form that the organizer will give you, because we would love to know what you think about this event and whether we should do something like this again, or what are the topics that you want us to discuss, right? And on behalf of all the students, I would like to thank Prof. Osman for agreeing to do this. So I've benefited a lot, and I'm sure the students did too. So we pray that Allah will continue to bless you with health, so that the Ummah can continue to benefit from your knowledge, inshallah. So I'm handing this event back to the MC, Shami. Thank you.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
All right, what a great discussion just now. So I'm sure that all of us have received abundant input from both speakers. And thank you all for the questions. So with this, I would like to take this opportunity to inform that in conjunction with this webinar on Islamic philosophy of science, we are also organizing a contest. Yes, a contest about scientific discoveries by Muslims. So this contest is open to all Malaysian university students, and the registration is open till the 25th of June 2022. We are more than glad and grateful to have you as one of the participants in this contest, as prizes will be awarded to the winners. So don't miss out on this golden opportunity, and do check out PMI UPM social media for more information. Okay, again, we would like to express our gratitude to Emeritus Prof. Datuk Dr. Osman Bakar and Dr. Irwan Hanish for sparing some precious time with us today. We truly appreciate having both of you in our session this morning. Before we end our session, let's take some photos together. So all participants, I request all of you to open your camera. So we will give you 1 minute to open your camera, and then we we will proceed with the taking of photos. All right, so there are 3 pages here, but only the first page where all of us are most open their camera. So we'll proceed with taking the photos. So I'll be counting 1, 2, and 3, and then the technical team will take the photos. All right, 1, 2, 3. All right, another one. 1, 2, 3. All right, thank you everyone for your contribution just now. So with that, this concludes our session today. Thank you all for attending, and I have one more announcement for all the participants. Please fill in the Google form posted in the comment section, or you can scan the QR code on your screen for the feedback and the merit redemption.
Yeah, thank you.
Last but not least, on behalf of this webinar organizing committee, we hope that all of you enjoyed the session, practice what you have learned in this webinar, and have a pleasant day ahead. Till then, goodbye and stay safe. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Yeah, Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi.
There's faith in my world. It comes back to your teachings and all your words. From your life I have learned to be patient and caring at every turn. The reason I'm strong, you're where I belong. In a world spinning out of control, the reason for my pride, you are my guide. And I will always follow your way, your way, your way. Oh, alayka sallallahu, oh Muhammad. Peace and blessings on you every day. Alayka sallallahu, oh Muhammad. You inspire me in every way. I promise that wherever I go, whenever I pray, I'll be sending you praise with the words that I say. Rasulullah, oh Muhammad, peace and blessings on you every day. There's light in my heart, helps me find my way back when I've gone too far. When all my anger makes me blind, I remember your mercy for all mankind. The reason I forgive as long as I live. In a world spinning out of control, the reason I love, I'll never give up. And I will always follow your way, your way, your way. Oh, alayka sallallahu, oh Muhammad. Peace and blessings on you every day. Alayka sallallahu, oh Muhammad. You inspire me in every way. I promise that wherever I go, whenever I pray, I'll be sending you praise with the words that I say. Rasulullah, oh Muhammad, peace and blessings on you every day. I know the only thing I want from this life, and it's to follow all your footsteps to paradise. So that's the way I'm spend all my time. Yes, I swear, by Allah, I swear, alayka sallallahu, O Muhammad, peace and blessings on you every day. Alayka sallallahu, O Muhammad, you inspire me in every way. Alayka sallallahu, O Muhammad, peace and blessings on you every day. Alayka sallallahu, O Muhammad, you inspire me in every way. I promise that wherever I go, whenever I pray, I'll be sending you praise with the words that I say. Rasulullah, O Muhammad, peace and blessings on you every day. There's faith in my world. It comes back to your teachings and all your words. From your life I have learned to be patient, caring at every turn. The reason I'm strong, you're where I belong. In a world spinning out of control, the reason for my pride, you are my guide. And I will always follow your way, your way, your way. Oh, alayka sallallahu, O Muhammad, peace and blessings on you every day. Alayka sallallahu, O Muhammad, you inspire me in
是9点半的 out。
promise that wherever I go, whenever I pray, I'll be sending you praise with the words that I say. Rasulullah, O Muhammad, peace and blessings on you every day. There's light in my heart, helps me find my way back when I've gone too far. When all my anger makes me blind, I remember your mercy for all mankind. The reason I forgive as long as I live in a world spinning out of control. The reason I love, I'll never give up. And I will always follow your way, your way, your way. Oh, alayka sallallahu, O Muhammad, peace and blessings on you every day. Alayka sallallahu, O Muhammad, you inspire me in every way. I promise that wherever I go, whenever I pray, I'll be sending you praise with the words that I say. Rasulullah, O Muhammad, peace and blessings on you every day. I know the only thing I want from this life, and it's to follow all your footsteps to paradise. So that's the way I'm gonna spend all my time. Yes, I swear, by Allah, I swear, alayka sallallahu, O Muhammad, peace and blessings on you every day. Alayka sallallahu, O Muhammad, you inspire me in every way. Alayka sallallahu, O Muhammad, peace and blessings on you every day. Alayka sallallahu, O Muhammad, you inspire me in every way. I promise that wherever I go, whenever I pray, I'll be sending you praise with the words that I say. Rasulullah, O Muhammad, peace and blessings on you every day. there's faith in my world, it comes back to your teachings and all your words. From your life I have learned to be patient and caring at every turn. The reason I'm strong, you're where I belong. In a world spinning out of control, the reason for my pride, you are my guide. And I will always follow your way, your way, your way. Oh, alayka sallallahu, oh Muhammad. Peace and blessings on you every day. Alayka sallallahu, oh Muhammad. You inspire me in every way. I promise that wherever I go, whenever I pray, I'll be sending you praise with the words that I say. Rasulallah, oh Muhammad, peace and blessings on you every day. There's light in my heart, helps me find my way back.
Okay, then